Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, another week, and another reveal. We are ever so slightly closer to the next expansion.
What next expansion?
So this week was the big reveal. It happened on Friday, and as for big reveal, it just meant we got 11 cards in Ungoro, the next expansion for Hearthstone. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, depending on whether or not you're a constructor or arena player, most of the card reveals were legendaries and epic cards. Cards that don't have.
Epic cards are now totally in the
Sure.
arena.
Well, considering what epic cards they revealed,
That's true.
yes.
Are you telling me Explore Ungoro isn't going to be the next OP arena card?
Oh my God. Well, I'm sure we'll see lots of trolling videos with that in mind, but no, I don't think it's going to be the next. I don't think it's going to be the next OP in the arena.
Okay,
just a guess.
Yeah. So okay, let's. I'm going to go over in the very beginning like our schedule in terms of the Lightforge coming up for the next couple weeks until this expansion actually releases. So they haven't actually announced the release date of Ungoro, but it's going to be the 6th. Oh, because that's when the packs are scheduled to allow you to be open. So unless they do this weird thing where like you can open the packs before you can use the cards, or the expansion launches and you still can't use your pre-order cards, that's going to launch at the 6th. Which means we have this Lightforge, the next Lightforge, and the Lightforge after that, before the expansion actually launches. So that final Lightforge, the one on the 2nd, is going to be when we go over like card by card, whatever's been revealed at that point, and we try to tell you what's going on. We're also going to try to create like another like setup video for the next expansion that goes over everything like totally separately, because that's going to be like another 3-hour affair. And also cards are probably not all revealed by the 2nd. So that's like the big podcast when it comes to Ungoro. Though the one this week, we're just going to kind of go over what the changes are going to be when the Year of the Mammoth like rotation truly kicks in, and we lose BRM, TGT, and LOE.
LOE. Yep.
So that's what we're going to really focus on today. And also, like, kind of what dangers there are in the arena, what Blizzard needs to do in this format, what the next expansion means, right? We're going to strip everything to its bones, but so we can look at what the new expansion should be adding. Because right now there's a lot of noise, right? A lot of the cards you use are TGT cards, like a lot. LOE has so many playable cards that define the meta. BRM even, right? Like dragons are going to be gone. It's going to be crazy. We're going to go over all that today. And the next week is going to be where Merps is going on vacation, so we're not going to have the Lightforge on Sunday as usual. It'll be a pre-recorded Lightforge, and we've got Chucky from the February arena leaderboards coming in so we can talk about arena from a constructive player's point of view, which is really interesting because he was number 1 in the NA arena leaderboard after basically having like not played arena since forever and not knowing what he's doing. So that's like a huge feat, and we're really lucky to have him come on next week. So that's the schedule for the Lightforge going forward. So let's just jump into it. It's Ungoro. If you've been living under a rock / just not paying attention, I'll be honest, I haven't paid that much attention to Ungoro because they haven't actually revealed like a whole bunch of cards or like really mechanics or all that much. Like I feel like I don't know anything about the next expansion. So let's just start with kind of like what we do know, right? We're not going to do card by card, but what is Ungoro going to be about?
Sure. Well, look, thematically, it's about dinosaurs, so I'm just guessing, we're probably going to get more dinosaurs. Wow, what a novel concept.
And remember that Bloodfen Raptor's a beast.
It is.
And they've announced a new type, right? Like a new, what do you call it?
Yes.
Like a mech replacement or a dragon replacement, whatever it is.
A new tribe.
Tribe, that's a good word.
So in all seriousness, Ungoro's themes, or what they are introducing, is number 1, a new tribe in elementals, and some cards will be adjusted as well. For example, all the Ragers, right? Ice Rager, Magma Rager.
They are now going to be a card that makes Magma Rager useful. I just know it.
Oh yeah, of course, because it is the most memed Rager. And
is
now
Amgam Rager an elemental, or is it like rotating out?
They're all. I do not remember right now.
Okay.
But yes, so Magma Rager is now an elemental. So number 1, they're introducing elementals. Number 2, and this should not really apply to the arena because I forget if it was Ixar or Ben Bro who said that journey cards, which are legendary spells that are always in your hand from turn one.
Oh
They,
yeah.
yeah, you can play those, and then
The
you
quest
have,
system, right? Like they give you a
yeah, it's a quest.
quest, and the quest
Yep,
is always something like play 8 Death Rattle minions, or just something that's ridiculous to do in the arena because you don't get to build
sure,
your deck. And so they just took them out of the arena the same way they did with
right.
what do you call it? Cthulhu cards.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into too many details about it because as of right now, they've announced that it's probably not going to be in the arena. That was the official response, so we don't have to talk too much
And I
about
really don't
that.
think it should be in the arena because they're all going to be
Right,
totally crappy
definitely.
cards.
And number three, we have something called adaptations, right? And with the sort of rotation of the three expansions, we don't really have Inspire and we don't really have Discover, right? And this adaptation seems to be something to replace Discover, but instead of you grabbing cards, it is you choosing which sort of
Adaptation.
stat adaptation or stat bonus for your minion. So let's just go through all of the adaptations,
Okay, so
right?
this is like a controlled version of Discover. Discover discovers anything, but it goes in your
Right.
hand, so you still have to pay the mana cost. This is usually an effect that's like just on the board, but it's like almost like using a spare part as you play it on the minion, right? So you're still limited by the range of spare parts you get. Like this really feels to me more like a spare part mechanic than a Discover mechanic.
Right. So let's go through one of the cards that was revealed that has adapt. It is a Verdant Longneck. It's a 5 mana, 5/4 Druid card with Battlecry Adapt. So you're paying 5 mana for a 5/4, and you get this extra bonus on top of it that you choose, right? And it's been revealed that there are 10 total adaptations, and let's just go through them. So it is Divine Shield, +3 attack, a Death Rattle that gives you 2/1/1 plants, Wind Fury, the ability to can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. They definitely need a name for this, by the way.
Shroud.
Shroud, whatever. That's fine. You can also gain Taunt, +1/+1, +3 health, Stealth until your next turn, so you can't get perma-stealth, and also Poisonous, which is thankfully a keyword now. Also, FYI, the 1/1 plants, they don't have a tribe or a tag or anything. They're
Okay,
just
so there's 10 different
little
things.
1/1 plants. There's 10 different things, so you have
Okay.
10 choices.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I've been counting as you've been saying them. Of the 10 different things, Blizzard values 7 of them at around 1 mana, and 3 of them at pretty much no mana. Or like lower than 1 mana typically. So overall, you're going to get an effect that's about 1 mana's worth, right?
Yes.
Like
Definitely.
that's the end result. And because it's Discover, you're never going to be totally stuck with the bad ones. Like it's not random, it's Discover. So if you get some of the bad ones like the Shroud one or whatever and you don't want it, just don't pick it, right? It limits your options, but you still get the value of a 1 mana one.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Which makes sense because it costs 1 mana to use the adaptability, right? Basically, like the adaptability is on a 5 mana 5/4, which is +1/+1 less than what it should be, than what a 5 mana card should be, and instead you get this adaptability to make up for it.
Right. And there's always value in choice, right? You get to look at the board situation and pick one that would be advantageous for your win condition.
And keep in mind, we're talking a 1 mana here. I don't mean 1 mana's worth of stats, which is usually 2. I mean like a 1 mana card, which is usually like 3 stats, if not 4 stats worth. So, like, giving a Divine Shield is like a Hand of Protection, giving +3 in terms of stats. So you get the +1/+1 stats, which is the normal 2 stats, but then +3 attack or +3 health, which are 3 stats each. So you're really you have a chance of, not a bad chance even, of being able to get just an overstatted minion for no extra cost, right? That's a
Oh,
5/4, but it's really a 5/7 for 5 mana. And 5/6s for 5 mana are pretty good, right? Those are like your standard pit fighter, like very on curve minions. So if you luck out in your Discover, not even luck out, because all of them are around that kind of like value.
Right.
You actually are just getting like overstated minions here.
Yeah, definitely. yeah, I think most of the time on empty board, the one you prefer is the +3 help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get a 5/7. That's really good. And other times, like let's say you put it down, you see that they don't have an answer, and you get the Wind Fury option, and it's on empty board. You're like,
Oh,
oh,
it's
okay,
great. You
yeah,
get
I'll pick
a
the Wind
Divine
Fury.
Shield against a non-ping class. Like, these are
Yes.
ridiculous. Like, what I want to drive home is that all of these cards, or at least the Verdurant Longneck, and the Gentle Megasaur is another one that was revealed way earlier. It's 4 mana, 5/4 Beast, Battlecry, adapt to your Murlocs. So you do have to have Murloc synergy, but it's basically a free kind of like free trigger. These adapt cards are super, super powerful in the arena because there's no like necessarily like a synergy or anything involved. You get to pick. So you get to adapt to the situation, and your adaptation is worth more than what the card is going to cost.
Right. Cost effectiveness, value, and flexibility. These are things that win you arena games, right? And adaptation. At least this card,
Maybe
who
the other
knows?
cards are worse, but like I
Right.
feel like they didn't just randomly give Druid a super overpowered adapt card,
Yeah, yeah.
Especially when the neutral card follows a similar theme of just they're treating adaptation like it's worth 1 mana when it should probably be worth like 2 mana because you also get the Discover effect.
Right.
So these are going to all be overstated cards, right? Like I think very significant power creep is going to happen here.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Very much a above average slash very good arena card. So,
Yep.
all right, so that's adaptation, and so far, we've had more cards being revealed, but most of them are legendaries, and we're not gonna really talk about that. ADWCTA, did you want to talk about one card that sort of we'll see quite often in the arena?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Tar Creeper.
Yes, definitely.
It's the only common neutral card revealed, and you know how neutral cards always impact the arena more than other cards, no
Whoa.
matter what they do about it. Like, they
Yes.
can reduce all the offering rates, but you still see them in every class, so you're going to see them in every matchup. And it's going to get, I assume, it's going to get some kind of offering bonus. Probably not 100%, because that'll be kind of ridiculous now that they're getting rid of a whole bunch of more cards. But, maybe 50%, maybe 25%, whatever. You're going to see it more often. Tar Creeper is 3 mana, 1/5 elemental with Taunt. And it has an ability that says has +2 attack during your opponent's turn. So it's a 3/5. It's a Chillwind Yeti. No, I'm sorry. It's a Senjin. It is a Tazdingo for 3 mana when it's your opponent's turn, and it taunts, so your opponent actually has to go through it. And on your turn, it's only a 1/5, and on your turn, taunt doesn't matter as a mechanic, so it's just a Amgam Rager, which is kind of crappy. So it goes from like being extremely overpowered on your opponent's turn to being extremely crappy on your turn. And this is a mechanic that Blizzard has confirmed is like a new thing they're trying out. So expect more of these kinds of cards to be pushed out, right? This is like Ongoro's version of like forbidden cards, right? You're just gonna get a series of these cards in different situations where on your opponent's turn a card has certain abilities and on your turn they don't, or maybe vice versa. I don't know. Either way, this is going to be an extremely powerful card just because it creates favorable trades for you when you play it on turn 3 to protect your 2-drops or your other 3-drop that you had placed. It eats 4 3s, it eats 3 3s at 3. Later on in the game, it's a 5 health taunt, which is still insanely useful. It's just overall a very, very good card. So again, like just in the cards they've revealed, we're seeing a very significant power creep. And what I've always said before is power creep generally in Hearthstone historically doesn't actually happen. What happens is whenever you get an adventure, you get power creep because there's very few cards being released and they have to try to make a lot of them viable. So they make them all really, really good. And then a big set comes out and it kind of resets everything back and you'll get a lot of very situational and kind of useless cards. And this year they've announced only big sets, right? All 3 sets are going to be big sets. So I don't know what kind of boundaries that they're setting for themselves, but so far we've seen a lot of like very, very good arena, like good stable arena cards.
Yeah, definitely. It does seem like the cards that are coming out, like they definitely put a lot of thought into MSG and Ongoro, right? No matter what you think of the results, it definitely seems like they are packing these expansions full of meaty new mechanics,
Yes.
tribes, effects, which is going to introduce power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because by introducing a lot of these things, if you're not introducing any power into it, like it's almost unrealistic to be introducing new things that don't do anything, right?
Yeah, and this is so good after Old Gods, which was pretty much nothing, and then Karazhan, which
Yeah.
is pretty much nothing. It's so good to finally be able to get like actual updates to the arena game, right? Even aside from 7.1, just like MSG was a huge shakeup. This is going to be a ridiculous shakeup because we're taking out 3 sets along with it.
Yep.
But yeah, and I wish we could tell you more about what's going to happen with Ongoro, but we really can't because they've released like 6 cards that you're actually going to see in the arena, right? Like it's not. We really
Right.
don't know what the meta. I can't tell you if it's going to be faster or slower or how you're going to play. We're just not at that point in the reveal stage yet, and we hope to do that 2 weeks from now.
Right.
But let's move on to what we can tell you. Let's move on to
Right.
something that we 100% know, which is that BRM, TGT, and LOE are all leaving the arena. 100% gone. We are in standard arena now. The rotation happens in the beginning of April, and with the release of Ongoro. And so this is a good time to take a look at what happens when we lose these cards. Like, we don't know exactly what will happen because Ongoro is going to come in at the same time with a set bonus on top of that. So what cards are available in Ongoro is really going to like shape what the meta is going to be like. But we can tell you what cards you will need to see in Ongoro for certain things to happen because the base is being shifted in a very, very stark direction.
Definitely. And we're looking at 2 major changes in a very short period of time, right? You know, we had the 3-hour podcast preparing you for this 1 month meta, and the 1 month meta is about to end. So we can't prepare you for the next meta. That's impossible because we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will prepare you for it. You should check out our YouTube channel like the day before release, and then we'll have a whole analysis because they card dump before that always. But we're too far out right now.
But we're just going to give you information that we know will happen, and you have like this is something you should know, and then combine this with the knowledge of the card reveal, and you will be ready.
Okay. So the first thing that I want to talk about is remember when 7.1 came in and we announced the death of 2-drops, and the death of 2-drops happened for pretty much all the classes we said it was going to happen for. And now 2-drops are kind of like take them, leave them, kind of a luxury. 3-2s are great as we said they were, but you're only going to get a certain number per draft, and 2-3s are kind of crappy. And that's the 2-drop meta. And the fact that we're losing 3 more expansions isn't really going to change that. It's not like those expansions were very, very like light on 2-drops. Those expansions had normal amounts of 2-drops you'd expect. They're not going to hurt the 2-drop meta even more. That's not going to happen because we've kind of hit a low, right? Like TGT was the big 2-drop bulk, and getting rid of that was what hurt. Getting rid of these guys aren't really going to hurt your 2-drops too much. I think the 2-drop meta will kind of stay solid unless Ongoro decides to release a whole bunch of neutral 2-drops, or they revert the changes and no longer penalize the classic set because there's a lot of 2-drops in there too. But what is going to change, and this is a huge point, this change I think will really like solidify. Like if this happens, it's going to be a pretty clear indication that Blizzard really is not thinking about the arena meta or like really wants arena to feel like constructed, because it's going to get ridiculous if they don't do something about it. And the easiest way to do something about it is just put it in the Ongoro cards, right? So what's going to happen is 3-drops are all going away. 3-drops are dead now. There are 10 common and rare 3-drops in the 3 sets that are being removed. 10 of them. That's a huge number, and a lot of them. And on top of that, and those are just what do you call them? Neutrals. Just neutrals. Those are the ones available to all classes. On top of that, most of the top tier 3-drops are going to be removed. Druid of the Flame, Mounted Raptor, Flame Waker, Imp Gang Boss, Unearthed Raptor, Spellslinger, Fierce Monkey, Dark Peddler. All these cards are just going to be gone and all at once. And if you remember, and on top of that, the MSG offering bonus is also leaving. And MSG had a lot of 3-drops, right? Remember when MSG?
Guns.
Yeah, before MSG, we had a nice 2-drop meta. When MSG came in, we were like, oh, you're gonna have so many 3-drops, and that was the case. MSG was not big on 2-drops. In fact, it created a 2-drop deficit. Before, like, Blizzard just said, all right, screw 2-drops altogether. But MSG was always good with the 3-drops. And the reason that 3-drops are okay right now in the 7.1 meta is being held up by this MSG bonus. Toxic Surus, Higher Gun, those are 2 neutral common cards. And they're, like, really, really good, too. So you're going to take them a lot. But also some class cards, Shaky Zip Gunner, Cabal Talon Priest, Shadow Rager. So the lack of an MSG bonus is just as impactful as reducing an expansion, because the MSG bonus is like something like 100%. So it's like removing another expansion on top of that in terms of your cards. That's a ton of 3-drops. They are all leaving. So first of all, the 4-3 meta that we kept talking about for 7.1, that's dead. Unless they create a bunch more 4-3 cards. But more importantly, the whole 3-drop meta may be dead. Your whole thing about like playing or not playing a 1-mana card and then coining out a 3 and playing another 3, who knows what's going to happen? You're barely going to have enough 3-drops to play, if you have enough 3-drops to play at all depending on what Ongoro cards there are. But now, with the removal of these 3-drops, we are in as bad of a place with 3-drops as we are with 2-drops in 7.1. No exaggeration, just as bad.
Right. Remember, this is not a prediction of the meta. This is just us saying what will happen.
Yep.
So we don't know what cards there are. And in fact, Ongoro will be highly, highly impactful because we're taking away a lot of cards, introducing Ongoro, so it'll already have a bigger effect, and it'll have an offering bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a super expansion, right? Like you're going to feel the Ongoro cards and feel the Ongoro meta, whatever it is.
So if you get like a whole bunch of cards like Tar Creeper, being added, then 3s may be fine, right? In the same way, if you get a whole bunch of 2-drops added, 2-drops may be fine. We really don't know at this point, but it's all going to be based on what cards Ongoro is going to add. Like, you could just look at Ongoro and see how many 2-drops they have there and how many 3-drops they have there, and that's your meta. That's how determinative Ongoro is. There's no base for you to work off of. The way that 4-drops have, for example. Like, 4-drops aren't going away. There's a base of 4-drops that exist in the game that is still there and it is still alive and well. But the 3-drops are gone. And part of the reason the 3-drops are gone is because your classic set, and this will always be a problem because Arena went standard. In your original set, there was no support for 3-drops and 5-drops. 3-drops were always weird. And, like really back in Classic, a lot of builds just didn't run any 3-drops at all. They just ran like extra 3-2s for 2-drops because almost always your 3-2s will be able to take care of whatever crappy 3-drop that your opponent's going to drop. And it gives you much more consistency on the 2-drop and being able to coin out 2 into 2, and it just made your curve much better. So that's the Classic set. That's the backbone of Standard. So that's why there's always going to be problems unless you have 3-drop heavy expansions with 3-drops, which normally is not a problem because 2-drops will fill the gap. But as we've seen, there's no 2-drops either. So it's all on Ongoro to determine what is happening. Now, what happens if there's actually no 3-drops and no 2-drops? What happens if Ongoro releases? And the reason we're so worried about it isn't because, we have to be worried about something. It's because if Ongoro looks like MSG, if Ongoro looks like Ode Gods, if Ongoro looks like either of the last 2 large expansions in terms of how many drops that they give, we're going to be in huge trouble. Like, they actually have to do something above and beyond what they did in prior large expansions in order to create, like, any semblance of a curve. Now, why is the curve important in the arena? I don't want to go too deep into it, but the curve is the only thing that prevents the meta from being a pure threat and response meta, where you are not drafting any 3-drops, and therefore you're not drafting any 4-drops, you're not drafting any 5-drops, you're literally just drafting big things and big answers. And when you're only drafting big things and big answers, it creates, it makes it very easy for aggro decks to win, so you are building only 2 types of decks, either a value deck or an aggro deck, which is already kind of the case in 7.1 because it's a horrible meta. And then depending on which one you build and which one you face, you win or lose. And all your aggro decks all suck. but it'll still beat a value deck if the value deck doesn't have board clears that can be played early on. But anyway, and if you're building a value deck, that's going to be entirely dependent on your draft. Like purely how many good cards, and especially good removals, single target removals that you get. So that is a horrible situation to be in when it comes to your skill in the arena. It becomes incredibly draft dependent. And that's one of the reasons why 7.1 is such a bad meta for skill. People's win rates are doing fine because there's an influx of new players coming into the arena, or like new arena players coming into the arena with like constructed skill, but that still doesn't really translate, so they're just like bad arena players. And that's kind of holding up the bottom end. Like, it's pretty easy to get to 5, 6, 7 wins, and then it gets like really hard without an insane deck. And that's going to be exasperated if Ungoro looks like MSG, if it looks like Old Gods.
Yep. So we'll cross our fingers, hold our breath, and see what happens. But that is going to be the case. You're going to see this polarization, right? Either aggro deck or value deck, because even if you want to draft mid-range, it's not going to be powerful. And like mid-range decks, you still need the small draw. Like you need a good sort of wide net, right? And it's going to be pretty tough.
Why make a mid-range deck when an aggro deck could probably kill you and a value deck could definitely kill you? Like, why? And those are going to be the two most popular archetypes.
So we'll see.
Like, things are just going to get really bad if Blizzard's not on top of this. And who knows, right? Like, I think Blizzard's pretty happy with themselves with 7.1, which is not a good sign. But, like, I hope they realize that we're about to go off, like, not just the 2-drop cliff, which was bad, but doesn't, like, completely destroy the arena as a game of skill. But it's about to go into, like, without 2-drops and without 3-drops, the gap between aggro and control has just gotten way too wide. And your mid-range just totally disappears. Like, you're no longer just pushing the curve up 1. You're creating a 3-turn difference between a deck that would have a curve and a deck that would not have a curve. Which is, you can't recover from that. Okay, so something else that's happening, and this is also like a consideration for the other side, which is that the fatties are gone. I call it the TGT special, because TGT gave us Kraken and Devils and Jormungandr and Cavaldier Raider, which are all huge cards that are good and that are common neutral. Devilstore and Draconic Crusher are also cards that have come along later, but they're just like really big, solid minion cards. And they've gotten pretty good in this meta, in the 7.1 meta, and they will almost certainly be good in the Ungoro meta as well. But they're gone. So by reducing the amount of really large cards, what you're doing is you're putting pressure on the other side. Because what are really large cards? What's a way to guarantee getting really large cards? Legendaries, right? In your draft, if you get lucky, and legendary really large cards aren't even just really large, they're also really good, generally.
Yep.
So you're going to take them anyway. So once again, you're moving into this direction of a very draft-dependent meta, where if you get offered the cards, you're obviously going to take them. There's no like skill in whether to take them or not. And then you're going to play them and you're going to win, because you're going to outvalue your opponents by having these big cards that are not only big, but also good. Whereas Devilsaur, Jormungandr, Cavaldier, Draconid, they're more big than they are good. Like, you more take them because they're an okay card, and they happen to be really big. So that still keeps an element of skill in drafting and deck construction in play. But once you take these cards out, and they are leaving, and we don't know if they're getting replaced, and what's stepping into its place are these giant legendary cards, you're going to have another loss of skill that's happening. Because everyone's going to try to build these value decks, and only some are going to be able to.
Right. Another factor that could really swing your win rate, right? Like in the draft, which is not something that we want. Although Ungoro with dinosaur theme, everyone is expecting big dinosaurs, right? And we've seen a couple of big dinosaurs, but once again, we haven't seen the commons and rares that will really impact the arena. So,
yep. So that may not be a problem. All they have to do is put out, like, I don't know, 2, maybe 3. 3 is probably a good number of, like, 6 mana or above common or rare minions that are, like, at least playably good, and then we're fine, right? This is not something that is a terrible concern, but they do have to do it. And if they don't do it, we're in trouble.
Right.
Unlike 3 drops and 2 drops, where they have to print like a whole bunch. Okay, so moving on to the next one. The mechanics that are leaving are the mechanics that are central to these 3 expansions. BRM is dragons. Dragons are gone. All dragon synergies in the arena will be total crap to the extent that they currently exist. And there are, because there are some dragon synergy cards like Dragon and Operative that aren't in BRM. So Netherspite Historian, right? Like, they're dragon synergies, but they're not a BRM. But BRM is going to remove all the dragons, and assuming they don't like pump in a whole bunch of new dragons, then you're going to have problems with these dragon synergies.
Right. You're not only just losing a lot of premium dragons, you're losing dragon synergy cards, right? Blackwing Corruptor and Blackwing Technician as well.
Mm-hmm.
So dragon synergy is basically dead. Unless you're a priest and you still get the Draconid operatives, which synergize with each other.
Yep, but they lost their offering bonus too.
They lost their offering bonus, so buy dragons.
Yep. Inspire is dead. I mean, Jousting's also dead, but who cares about Jousting? Inspire creates a snowball mechanic in the arena, which was had a lot of detractors to it. I didn't mind it too much, but either way, that's a dead concept, and that'll help make the classes come a little closer together, because that was always one of the things that made good classes better and bad classes worse. But that's going to be gone, and Discover is also going to be like half gone. There's these tri-class cards that still use Discover. Like every expansion, it seems like they like print a couple new Discover cards because they like the mechanic, and I assume more Discover cards are coming in, right? To Ongoro, because Elise is like leading the expedition, and she's from LOE. So I don't think Discover is going to actually be gone, but it will be reduced compared to what we're seeing right now, which I know a lot of players like. Not a lot of players like, because Discover is a skill-based mechanic, but it's also really frustrating to play around, especially when it's a very wide net. You basically say, oh, my opponent can now have any card. What read do I have on them?
Yep. So those are 3 of the big themes, that we've seen for I don't know how like 2 years now, almost. And assuming that Ongoro doesn't make dragons a priority or Inspire a priority.
There's not been an Inspire card printed since TGT. I think we're safe here.
And we'll say this, like, for example, with dragons, even if you're assuming there are going to be dragons in Ongoro, which, there might be 1 or 2 of, and even with the offering bonus, you're losing so many dragons and so many impactful cards, it's almost impossible for Ongoro to make up for it. Mm-hmm. Like, they have to print another sort of historian type of, like, you're losing the card draw, you're losing the Blackwing Corruptor. Like, these are things that are not just dragons, but things that use dragon synergy, right? So Ongoro has to really surprise us with those sort of cards for dragon to actually be a thing. Otherwise, it'll just be like how mech is these days.
Yep. Okay, so let's move on to class identity. There's a lot of things to talk about here, and I'll talk about the curve part afterwards. The first thing I just want to go over is just some like really important class cards that we're losing, so that you don't have to play around them anymore. Dark Iron Skulker is gone. Thank you, it is gone. Rogue now has no board clears above 1 damage. It is the class that is most vulnerable to you spreading out. Like, even Warrior has Fool's Bane still. Like, even Hunter still has Explosive Shot, even though Power Shot's gone.
It's so sad.
Yeah. And Unleash the Hounds can always be buffed by a card or whatever, right? Unleash the Hound is a weird 1 damage clear. So Rogue is now firmly in its lane, which is good. And I will be so sad if Ongoro publishes any card that moves the Rogue out of this lane, because we have finally gotten the Rogue back into the lane that they should always have been. Okay, next, and I know you'll love this one, Paladin. What's Paladin losing?
Oh my god. I'm getting flashbacks to when I just totally complained about this card so much before it came out. No more Keeper of Oldemon. No more. And it's not that big of a deal now, especially it's like what's the plague in the arena now? It's not Keeper of Oldham. It's not even one thing. It's like all the potions, all the randomness, like legendary after legendary, epic after
You
epics.
mean 7.1?
7.1, thank you. Yes. Uh, at the same time, though, paladins have eliminated like a very key tool that they've had with Keeper of Voldemort that they just don't have anymore, right?
Yep.
Which is just it's as close to a hard removal as they have, and it's a very very good one.
So now they have like humility, equality, Aldor. Like they still have stuff, but they don't have like that ridiculousness that is almost a hard removal while putting a 3/4 on the board, like for 4 mana. Like that was ridiculous. So they don't have hard removals anymore. Warriors don't have hard removals. They haven't had hard removals, but like now they're really not going to because Crush is gone. And Druid and Hunters also sort of don't have hard removals. I say sort of because Hunters have Hunter's Mark, kind of, not really, kind of a soft removal. They have Deadly Shot, which is only a hard removal if you can clear the rest of the board. And Druids have Naturalize. They're losing Recycle and Mulch. They already don't have Recycle, and they're going to lose Mulch. So all the Druid has left is Naturalize, which again is only kind of a hard removal, because it is a hard removal for an aggro deck, but for a value deck, it does not accomplish what a hard removal needs to accomplish. Right?
Right.
A hard removal should remove an opponent's really big thing and give you, like, keep you even on value. Naturalize gives your opponents 2 cards, totally wrecking that function of a hard removal. So, now you get a few classes actually without hard removals, and that's something that you guys should really like focus on when it comes to Ungoro cards. If they provide a paladin hard removal, a hunter hard removal, a druid or a warrior hard removal, that's going to be game changing. Because especially in a threat and response meta, what are your responses? Hard removals are one of your key responses. Because remember, the threats are generally just one big thing. Like, the threats are generally not a bunch of little things, because we're not curving out anymore. So even if your opponent is it's much more difficult for your opponent to get an advantage by playing the board game. So you're like, that's why like flame strikes aren't the worst thing in the world these days, right? Like, if you have a flame strike, you're just like looking for a chance to use it, any chance to use it, and if you don't have a flame strike, you're playing against a mage. You're kind of okay to like, you're easily playing around it because you have so many things with 5 health or more, and you generally don't have that many cards on the board. So that's that. And again, it makes these classes a lot weaker. And what are these classes? Paladin's already pretty weak. Warrior's already the weakest. Druid is already, like, the second weakest. Like, these are very weak classes already. And we're just going to make them even weaker. Hunter's okay right now, but that's because Hunter goes super aggro. And we'll go into why Paladin can't really do it. But Druids and Warriors, maybe, depending on what cards that they use.
Right. So there's also other cards that are being removed, which definitely have an impact on the arena. I don't know if you want to talk about them or not.
Go for it.
But sure. For example, Paladins are missing one very critical buff, right? Seal of Champs is now gone as well, which, you know, before you definitely want to consider if they had something on the board, and before turn 7, your fears were Seal of Champs and Blessing of Kings,
Yep.
right?
Well, on turn 4, the whole game opens up for the Paladin always, right? Like, back in Classic, Paladin was the turn 4 class, where they can't really do much until turn 4, and then they destroy you.
Sure. But in terms of buffs, you know, they have Silver Moon Portal as well, but the ones that you really feared typically were Blessing of Kings and Seal of Champs, right? Those are typically the more powerful buffs, and we're getting rid of one. For Mage, especially the way that Mage plays these days, which the vast majority of the time you're playing Mage as a very sort of slow, grindy style with a lot of spells, right? In the threat and response meta, you are responding a lot with Mage, more often than you're going aggro. And now they are missing Ethereal Conjurer. Ethereal Conjurer is gone, which was a
huge
tippy
card.
Top premium card in that style, right?
Yeah. Also, they're missing Flame Lance.
Yeah.
Which is their second hard removal, basically. So now Mages, it's weird, but they only have one hard removal left. It's just Polymorph. They're back in line with, like, Shaman.
Yeah.
Like, so much is changing.
once again, we have to remember the Hall of Fame, right? And the class that suffers probably the most from the Hall of Fame is Warlock, in that they're missing Power Overwhelming.
Okay.
So they're missing two big tempo cards now, like Imp Gang Boss, Power Overwhelming, and those two cards like went so well together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Shaman's missing Thunderbluff Valiant. That is the card that I'm most concerned about because that is literally the other piece of Flame Tongue Totem when it comes to one particular archetype of Shaman. And also with Mookless Champion also leaving. Sorry, is it Mookless Champion?
I don't remember exactly
what the card was called.
1 sec.
The 5 mana card that buffed everything.
What? Yeah. Mookless Champion.
Yeah. Okay. So with both the Mookless Champion's definitely gone. It's an Inspire card. So I just didn't know what the name was. So with Mookless Champion gone as well, like you're losing a whole lot of that particular archetype of totem buffing shamans, right? Where you have something on the board, and every turn you get a new totem that no one can remove with a hero power because it has 2 health, and your totems can attack your opponents the next turn. It's like infinite value, super late game. You just lock it down and you win. And it was already hurt a lot in the threat and response meta because there's more responses to kill these things. But now you don't even get Thunderbluff Valiant. So unless they replace that, this style is going to really take a hit. Okay. So I do want to quickly go over, like, remember back when we were entering the 7.1 meta and we said 2 drops were leaving, and then we said, well, except for these classes which can still draft aggro. We're going to run down for you except these classes which can still have 2 or 3 drops. The class that has the most number of drops, without considering Ungoro, you're never going to guess which class it is. You can take 3 shots, and they're all wrong. Because the answer is Rogue. Without a hero power, like if you don't even count the fact that they have a hero power, so they always have a 2-drop, they still have more 2-drops than any other class in terms of their class cards. And they have a good amount of 1-drops and 3-drops as well. So Rogue is the one that is going to be, and again, that's not counting the hero power. They actually do have a hero power, which means they can even 2 and coin into 2 whenever you want. So when it comes to going aggro, or potentially, I'm not even going to call it going aggro, I'm just going to call it curving out, because no one else is going to curve out. When it comes to the potential to still curve out in a draft, Rogue is head and shoulders above all the other classes with the new meta. They don't even need any new cards. They will just be able to curve out. Next is our 4 classes, which have enough class cards. And here's the thing: when the old sets are removed and you get the new set coming in with offering bonus, all the existing cards will actually get a very slight, like maybe like 20% bump in offering rate because we're removing more cards than we're putting in. So the fact that you have existing class cards for these kinds of drops actually is a very significant thing. It becomes even more significant if Blizzard takes our suggestion and makes the spell bonus part of a class bonus, right? So they get class cards. So the other classes that have a shot at curving out are Mage, Druid, Hunter, and Warrior. They all have multiple additional 2-drops, and Hunter actually has a whole freaking 8 3-drops anchoring it down. So when all the other classes can't necessarily start on 3 anymore, Hunters can definitely still start on 3. Not to mention having a good shot at starting on 2, or even 1, compared to everyone else. Again, it's just harder to start on these early turns, but they're doing okay curve-wise. Druid actually loses a whole bunch of their curve cards, especially the really good ones. No more Druid of the Saber, no more Aspirant, no more Living Roots. Druid of the Flame is gone. Like, they actually lose a lot of them. But they were so far ahead on the curve game. That was always like the one good thing about Druid, even as Blizzard was destroying the class. They always curved out better than anyone else. So they're still okay on the curve, which means, like, again, none of this except Rogue is enough by itself if Ungoro looks like MSG. If Ungoro looks like MSG or Old Gods, none of these classes will curve out. You should not draft curve for any of these classes. But if they up Ongoro's rate just like a little bit, or if they give like some class cards to these classes, for example, Mage already has 3 2-drops that are still in, and Ongoro's revealed card for Mage is a 2-drop. And it's a really good 2-drop, and it's a common. It's a 2/3 card that draws you a secret from your deck if you have one. Like, that's a really good card. You just have a secret anywhere in your deck, and you get an extra card in your hand. So you're probably going to take that card pretty highly, which means Mage now already has 4, maybe 4.5, depending on the offering bonus, 2-drops. Which means Mage is basically where Rogue is, where it can go aggro, because we have this Ongoro card. And if it has one more 2-drop, or even a 3-drop in Ongoro for its class cards, well, then it's definitely an aggro class. And when I say it's an aggro class, I don't mean like it has to be played aggro. I mean you have the option to draft an aggro deck, which is huge, because the other classes don't even have that option. So if they just get a bunch of like crappy small cards, they just lose, because they need to be drafting towards value in the beginning. It's the way the arena drafting system is set up. It's very, very bad and low skill for like a threat and response meta. Like if you want a high skill ceiling for a threat and response meta, you want like a sealed kind of playstyle, where, or like even an arena kind of playstyle, but where you can like not play certain cards, right? Like you draft 40 cards and you build a deck with 30, like something like that. Because otherwise you're just going to get like any classes that don't have the option to go aggro is severely hurt in the draft. Anyway, so mages are going to be fine. Pyroblast is still going to be a thing. Mages can sort of go aggro now, even though you're still more incentivized to do value. In the next expansion, I predict that mages will be one of the most aggro classes, just based on the one card that we see right now and the fact that they retain a lot of their 2-drops. Yep. So that's kind of it. Warlock is... So the other 4 classes that remain that need a ton of help from Ongoro in order to have a viable curve, which means that they're probably not going to get it. Like, we're talking they need at least like 2 2-drops and a 3-drop here at a minimum. Probably more like 3 2-drops and a 3-drop. So that's probably not going to happen. But those classes are Warlock, Paladin, Priest, and Shaman. Priest and Shaman have no shot. They have like no curve cards whatsoever left. There's no way. Like, Ongoro has to do something totally crazy and just only give them curve cards for it to work out. So Priest and Shaman are just control classes now. And Warlock and Paladin, you know, they generally want to go more aggressive. And they kind of it's a little weird with these two, because Warlocks have 5 1-drops and Paladins have 8 1-drops. But they both only have 1 2-drop, which means they can't actually curve out. But they can play a 1-mana card. But you have to draft a lot of 1-mana cards to be able to consistently play a 1-mana card. And to the extent you do that, you don't have value in your deck left, so you're going to die. So it's actually even worse, because it means you can't draft that. With Warlock, you can hero power to kind of like make up for it, which is fine if you have a lot of taunts and whatever. So Warlock is still viable-ish, even though it's not really an aggro class. It's just like a weird shifted curve class. But Paladins are totally screwed. Like, Paladins have no way out of this. They have a whole bunch of 1-drops that they can't play or draft. They have no 2-drops to anchor it, and they have like an okay amount of 3-drops along with Warlock. So the most in danger classes when it comes to the Ongoro meta is Paladin. That's number 1 in terms of danger. I think you might, if you're just listening to us generally, you might think like, oh, why don't you mention Warrior as one of the worst ones? It's because Warrior is going to actually get better with Ongoro, because all the cards that are leaving, they're mostly crap. So their offering odds are actually going to go up when it comes to their chances of drafting like a good weapon, for example. Like, there was no good weapon released for the Warrior in any of those 3 expansions that are leaving. So Warrior is going to get a shot in the arm just from doing nothing. But Paladin is going to drop even harder. Warlocks are not going to be good. They definitely need Abyssal Enforcers offering penalty of 50% to be removed. Priest is fine playing control. I think that's how Blizzard prefers Priest play anyway. So it's just going to be a very one-dimensional class and a very like RNG heavy, like in the draft. Do I have enough threats? Do I have enough responses? Kind of like draft. And Shaman's in that weird spot, right? Where your totems don't do anything anymore because you don't have the board and you have to play reactively. So I don't know what's going to exactly happen with Shaman. They still have plenty of really high value cards, but they're going to be very threat and response as well, along with Priest. So that's my rundown of where things are before Ongoro really impacts the meta. But having taken out all the cards in BRM, TGT, and LOE.
Pretty good. All right. Is that it for what's rotating out?
Yeah, I think that's it for what's rotating out.
Right.
And you guys can you should follow along the card reveals, and you can have a pretty good idea of what these classes are doing. Like in 7.1, class divergence is huge, right? Like each class really is being cornered into its identity. Like Blizzard is leaving a lot less like freeform drafting to go on, and so the backbone of these classes and what remains is going to be very important when you're adding Ungoro cards in.
All right. So, like we said before, we really need to see what cards sort of come out. And there's been more card reveals that we haven't really talked about. I think our plan is just to lump them all together and present them because a lot of how good the cards are going to be sort of depends on how they interact with other cards as well,
Yep.
right?
And
so
in the meta.
we're saving that. Yeah, and within the meta as well. We have, we don't know how the meta is going to shape out right now. Okay, time for question from the GOAT.
Question from the GOAT.
Question from the GOAT. This week, it's a good time to reflect. It's a good time to sort of, also stay on the theme of the cards that are leaving as well. I'll go first, give you some time to think about it. But basically, we have these 3 expansions that are rotating out. What card are you happy about the most rotating out? I'm going to surprise you with my answer. We talked about Keeper of Voldemort.
And Keeper of Voldemort.
More importantly, if you could keep one card, have it not rotate out, what card would you keep? And then obviously, explain your reasoning. I'll tell you, and my 2 answers, I think that the first one that I'm really happy about, Arena players would definitely sympathize with, Flame Juggler is gone. No more sort of turn 2, win or lose the game, right? Flame Juggler is
Mad Bomber.
Mad Bomber is a little bit different, right? Like I think with Mad Bomber, a lot of times like the swing is, I don't know. For some reason, maybe I just sympathize with bombers more.
Yeah, I think you just like bombers more.
Yeah,
it's even more RNG than Flame Juggler.
It's even more RNG. Maybe that's what I like about it. I don't know. But, well, first of all, I mean, Bomber is also one of those cards that, for those of you who want consistency, like, you don't like that, right? Like, you don't want early game pings because a ping on turn 2 means so much.
Yep.
And I mean, in all honesty, like, Bomber is something that also wins games and is sort of an issue, right? You play a 2-1, they play a Bomber, and the game turns on whether it hits the 2-1 or not, right?
Why are you playing? You play a 3-2, they play a Bomber. And then your opponent has like a 1/6 chance to like win or something ridiculous like that.
Or
sorry, like
in,
one.
Right.
I'm not doing the math. Well, it's like 1.5 over 9, whatever that is.
Or in Wild, it used to be you play Zombie Chow and the Bomber hits it 3 times, obviously. But yeah, like it sort of getting rid of these early game pings, I think is pretty important. So Flame Juggler is gone. The card I'm actually going to kind of miss because it's a card that I've grown to respect and sort of see how it interacts with your mind, right? In this meta. Is actually Wobbling Runts. Wobbling Runts is disappearing.
You're missing Wobbling Runts?
I don't think I miss it so much as I think it's definitely an interesting card. And when it came out, like we said the same thing, right? I'm just like, wow, this is like a very well-designed card, right? And to this day, I think they need more card designs like this, in which case, like, the stat distribution is like perfect for what it does. And I'm not saying perfect for you, the user. It's just like very, very annoying for both of you guys, right? For the opponent and for you, because you can't kill it off as fast as you want. And also, like, it gives them a turn to plan with it. I think cards like Wobbling Runts are extremely well designed, and that makes me sort of miss the fact that it's gone.
It's true. It's true. There's not a lot of cards like Wobbling Runts.
No.
That makes you think, and it's like it's just a minion, right? It doesn't really do anything, and that's
right.
That's what makes it all the more special. But we know how Blizzard feels about minions. in the arena at least. So I'm not terribly optimistic about the fate of wobbling runs, or that any new cards like that are going to be made. Because when was wobbling runs was so long ago. Is there another card that's like that?
So when you say like that, like here's how we and for those of you who are like, well, what do you mean like wobbling runs? Like obviously there's nothing that summons. So it's a control oriented slow card that speeds up when it dies,
Yeah.
right? So like Cairn is
Cairn
something
is
that
even. It's not Cairn.
Cairn
It's
is
like
even. Exactly.
it's like kind of like spiders, but like spiders is very like Haunted Creeper was similar in concept, right? Basically, like you're the one trying to kill it, and your opponent is the one trying to keep it alive.
Right, but you gain 3 times the speed.
Yep.
When you kill this thing off. Also, Haunted Creeper can be killed by anything, right? This thing is really awkward to kill. Like you can kill off Haunted Creeper whenever you want,
Right.
Almost. This thing, it's actually kind of tough for you to kill it, even when you want to kill it.
Yep.
And then at the same time, basically 6/6 worth of stats is a lot. So they basically want to remove it, and it gives them at least a turn, and sometimes even 2 turns to set up for that removal, right? It's a very well-designed card. I don't think we've seen something like it,
I don't think we haven't, because it fits into the arena style in terms of how challenging it is, much more than the constructed style.
Right.
Because for the constructed style, generally, you don't really care. You just leave it on the board, right? There's not much to think about when you're the opponent against a wobbling runs.
For example, in the chat right now, I see people throwing out examples, but they're very different. Like Twilight Summoner,
no,
I think it's very different.
It's
because,
a 1/1. You can kill it off whenever.
You can kill it off whenever.
Yeah.
Part of what makes wobbling runs awkward is the fact that they don't always have a 6
It's not
attack.
part of it. It's like almost the entirety of what makes it awkward. That's like the identity. That's like the soul of the card. Is that it is a 6/4, 2/6. I mean.
Yeah. Others people are saying like the 3 web spinners. No, that's completely different. You get cards, you don't get stats on the board.
That doesn't interact with people at all, really. There's just it's just a 1/1. It's a very different thing when it comes down on the board, how much you care about it. Okay. So that's question from the goat. Question from the goat, brought to you by our patrons, patreon.com/grinninggoat.
Are you not going to answer this?
I answered it before. I already talked about the cards, right? Dark Skullcurse, Thunderbluff Valiant.
Okay.
I went through my cards. Dark Skullcurse, obviously a horrible card. Thunderbluff Valiant's a great card. I want to keep it. It's problematic for an archetype for the shaman. But yeah, question from the goat is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon.com/grinninggoat. Thanks for feeding the goat, guys. Okay, card good bad. Take it away.
Card good bad.
This is one you wanted to talk about, yeah.
Indeed, we are talking about Enter the Coliseum, and typically we don't talk about epic cards, but now that we're in 7.1, epic cards are a real thing. So, we're talking about Enter the Coliseum. If you guys don't know the card, and I don't blame you if you don't know the card, but it is an epic paladin spell, 6 mana, and you basically, I don't know the exact card text, but you basically reduce both sides of the board to
destroy all minions except the one with the highest attack.
The highest attack on both sides. Yeah. So why is this good or bad for paladins, and why is it relevant now? First of all, you can get it more often now, and second of all, how do paladins play these days? Right? Paladins play with the hand buff mechanic. It's pretty tough for them to play in that traditional paladin way, in which they get on the board, they buff it, and they snowball. Right now, it's more of the solitaire kind of paladin where they Smuggler's Run, Grime Street, Outfitter, and then they play lots of big stuff like 2 mana 4/5s, right? Stuff like that. So when they do this, one of the ways in which you beat Paladin, or as a Paladin, how you lose when you play this sort of solitaire style, is you get rushed out. Unless you have the oversized Sunwalker or the oversized Tyrion, which you do see nowadays. players will recognize, hey, I can't trade into this stuff. I'm just going to spread out, have like 4 or 5 minions to your 1 minion, and say you don't have the consecration, and I'm just going to go face. Enter the Colosseum helps you out in that most of the time you're going to have the biggest minion. So when you play Enter the Colosseum, you're going to get rid of all of their small stuff that's really annoying for you, trade into their minion that's the biggest on their board but is still smaller than your minion, and then at that point you can stabilize, right? Because you have the bigger minions, they have used their small cards, now they're probably just playing like one big minion to your big minion, and your big minions always win. Plus, you're going into Grime Street Protector turn if you are playing this on turn 6. It's a card that you didn't really draft before, but even if you did, like, it didn't really fit into your playstyle.
But in MSG, it got yeah, these are cards that, like, Paladins changed a lot.
Yeah.
Like, a lot between MSG and, like, 7.1. It was played the same way for so long, like, for, like, a year and a half before this. And now it changed, and all of a sudden, this card that's been around for a while went from, like, okay, interesting, but kind of awkward, to, like, pretty much usually exactly what you want to do as the Paladin.
Yeah. And it's a card that has that Twisting Nether Doom effect in that your opponent can't play around it.
Yep.
They just can't.
And they probably shouldn't. It's still an epic card. Like, we rated a 119. It's still kind of awkward, but, you know, it's below a Sunwalker. It's below the Big Time Racketeer. But it's also, like, a definitely significantly above average card, even though it's a double-sided board clear technically. And you, as the Paladin, in theory, should have a bunch of small minions. You don't anymore, though. Like, that's the whole Paladin problem. The way the class was originally designed and what the class looks like now with the hand buffs is totally different. And you can't do both. You kind of do, like... Well, you could kind of do both, actually. I take that back. But just the card quality and the way the meta's going is just so bad for the Paladin.
Right.
Okay, I want to give a shout out to our tier list that we have updated. It is up, the lightforge.com, and it's updated for 7.1 meta, and it will be updated on day 0 for the new expansion when those cards come out, and that'll be layered on top of the 7.1 meta. So to the extent that the 7.1 meta is, like, severely changing, like, I'll take into account the 3-drop thing, but that aside, it's going to be difficult. So those cards will come in. It'll be, like, a little messy in the beginning, maybe, but it will come in on day 0. For now, though, these changes have really solidified, I think, the different relationships between the different, like, sizes in the meta. We've recentered on 100, which allows us to be, like, literally twice as precise as we were before, as well as making things look nicer. Like, 100 is totally average. It is the average card that you are offered. We've taken into account all the new offering odds rules and the recentering and all of that. And 0 is an absolute 0. It means it's actually a worthless card. You are just as good not having the card as you are having the card. And the highest card, I think, is a 202 for Fiery War Axe. Mostly because, one, it is a 2-drop, and it's really rare for it to be a 2-drop. It doesn't get eaten by any 3-drops. In fact, it trades positively with any 3/3s or 4/3s, so it's just in a ridiculous good place in this meta. And there was a huge split now between 3/2s and 2/3s. It was only, like, I don't know, 4 months ago when 3/2s and 2/3s were, like, 1 point apart. And now, I don't know how far apart they are between a Croc and a Bluffing Raptor. Bluffing Raptor is at 109. River Croc is at a 98. So they're more than 10 points apart now. Like we said, right? 2-drops are getting close to being useless these days. Whereas 3/2s are still very solid because they can challenge 3-drops. I don't know what else to say about the tier list. We changed a lot of cards. We've adjusted Dragon Synergies for Priest. It's very much in line with the 7.1 meta. We're making a couple of slight tweaks later tonight / tomorrow, but we're pretty much set on the whole 7.1 thing. And so it's definitely, like, you know, it wasn't in a usable state before that because we didn't update it for 7.1. I just wanted to let people know that it's updated, it's good, we're using it now, we're drafting based on it. And it's taken into account the current, like, weird meta that's happening, and that I really hope does go away when Ungoro comes. Like, I really hope that Ungoro looks more like GVG to give, like the curve, the shot in the arm that it needs. It's just frankly not fair and not fun to play and draft as classes that don't even have a shot of drafting a curve deck. Like, and if Ungoro really ends up in a place where no class besides Rogue can draft a curve deck, it's gonna be like in a really bad spot. Like when the game starts on turn 4, like at that point, it's just who has better cards, and that's not good for the arena. At least skill-wise. I'm sure it's good for the arena if you're a constructed player and you don't know arena and you're coming in for the first time. It's going to be a lot more forgiving in terms of the draft and the gameplay than getting your deck handed back to you by an arena player that curves out perfectly and ekes out those little advantages, and you're like, what? But I have better cards. So we'll see where that goes. But I like where the tier list is generally, and there's a couple slight tweaks coming. But one thing to note is, while a lot of the big cards got a lot of like bonuses, you also see like card draw cards get some bonuses as well. Hunter still has significant uses for their 2-drops, and that's all like the calculations all worked out very well there. So I'm kind of very happy that happened sort of automatically. Okay, you want to wrap this up with Class Talk Rogue?
Sure. So this week we're playing Rogue, and I don't know how helpful this advice will be, just because this meta is, I don't know, like the dinosaurs. I just realized, like this podcast has been all about like extinction. Ooh, we are preparing for Ungoro. Although I guess it's weird that we're introducing dinosaurs. Mind-bending. Anyways, we're talking about Rogue, and Rogue is, not surprisingly, very good in this meta, and it has always been very good historically as well.
Victor says it's number 1.
There was actually a post made by one of our mods and number 3 EU player in January, Dr. Stein. He made this very comprehensive sort of data collection and analysis. You can see it on the Arena HS subreddit, but basically he collected the win rates of a lot of streamers. You and me are in there, Hafu, Ratsma, Shady Bunny, etc. A lot of arena streamers, and sort of because he wanted to see, well, you know, we have this idea of what classes are the best. Why don't we just get stats, right, to see? And it's been confirmed, or at least according to all the streamers and how they play, Rogue is number 1 by a decent margin. I don't remember the exact, numbers there. But it's not too surprising, because Rogue is one of the classes that can last, I think, is due to sample size. Like, not a lot of streamers are playing Druid and Warrior, right? All right. They seem to be last, right? Druid and Warrior, which confirms what everyone's thinking. At the same time,
hey, man, I just got a 12-win Druid. That should, like, based on the sample size, that should really swing it in favor of Warrior being last.
I think it's included in there. Who knows? But Rogue is number 1, and because, in a spell-heavy meta, Rogue's number 1 have really good spells, right? Yes. Assassinate, very good. Sap, Jade Shurikens with the bonus to other Jade Shurikens, very good. You have Deadly Poison, huge tempo plays, right?
Yeah, like what you can do is you can just like look at the tier list and then look at like which scores are over 140 and look at how many of them are spells. And Rogues lead the way there compared to other classes. Like, you'll have classes like Shaman with more things, but a lot of them are like weapons or minions, right? And then you have other classes that you think have good spells, like mages, and then you look at it and you're like, all right, that's not really any better than the Rogues stuff.
Right. Oh, I actually, just a point of clarification. So apparently Priest is last so far.
Thank you. I told you Priest sucked.
Well, so Priest is apparently last according to the streamer stats. Yes. Right. Druid,
and I contributed to that a lot, and so did you.
I did. I contributed to that.
we all contributed to lowering the Priest win rate.
Right. Anyways, it's without going into too many details, because we could even have a Lightforge just about that. But if you guys are interested, definitely check out the post on Arena HS. We want to talk about Rogue though. So we've established that Rogues have a lot of spells. Also in a meta in which 2-drops are not necessary / hard to get, right?
Yes.
Rogues always have the dagger.
Yes.
And they can dagger and, go into Deadly Poison, right? dagger and just like kill one drop, or double hit
Or
into a
just the
two drop.
dagger's a thing you can
Save
do.
it.
It has tempo,
Yeah.
and it has the most tempo out of any hero power. The only other class with a hero, well, okay, two other classes have hero powers that actually add tempo to the board on turn 2. One's a paladin, which is a 1/1, and one's a shaman, which is a 0/2 totem for the most part. Like, the one damage twice dagger is insane compared to those two. So, like, your backup option's really good. But yeah, so that's Rogue. It's good. It's good. Now, for the Arena Coupe, we always do poorly with Rogue, but we'll see what happens. And we're on, like, a really bad streak in the Arena Coupe. We got, like, 2, like, mages that, like, did not go very far. I don't know what it was before then. I think we're on, like, a huge slump in the Arena Coupe.
Right.
Recently.
Also, these days, Arena seems to have gotten harder, right? And it's not just coming from...
Not to, like, reach 6 or 7 wins, which we haven't been doing on the Arena Coupe.
No, I'm not saying it's hard. It's a lot more inconsistent.
Yes, it's a lot more inconsistent. There's more variance, yes.
You can see a lot of crazy stuff. Like, before, if you were in the 2-2 bracket, you really didn't see much crazy stuff, right? And I'm not saying the kind of players that you statistically meet at 2-2 have changed, but
I think they have. I've seen, like, chat has been, at least when I've been playing, chat has been, like, all over the whole, like, hashtag NA meta, because they just see my opponents doing, like, really, really obvious misplays.
Well,
like,
no, at 2-2, like, no, you see more of those players, like, at 4-1 or 5-1.
Okay, true. At 2-2, you have always seen a lot of those players.
Yeah.
Okay.
But now, a lot of times they have the, like, Kazakis into Reno Jackson, into, like, the crazy stuff.
Yes,
right?
yes. And it's because there's more legendaries there, and the offering rates are changed, and you have more spells, and you have more synergies. Like, it's what Blizzard wanted the arena to be, and the arena has become, just based on their plans. So these are some costs to having the arena be a little more threat and response-y. Like, when your opponent just has more threats than you have responses, you're gonna have a hard time. Yeah, so I think we can end on that. I do really like the fact that Priest is last, and I think that has really a large part to do with you and me. Because if he's just tracking, like, like 8, 10 arena streamers or whatever, like, we're a huge portion of those Priest runs probably, and we have been doing horribly with Priest. So Priest may not actually be the worst, but we are certainly not doing very well with them, with that class.
Well, the thing with Priest is, like, the Priest is definitely one of, if not the most draft-dependent class. It is definitely the most draft-dependent class, yeah.
Yeah, and in my opinion, it's the least skill-based class, but that's also could be influenced by the fact that I suck with it. And I like to think that I have skill. But it just feels to me like you don't really get to do anything. You just kind of, like, wait to see if you have the cards, and then you either win when you do or you don't when you don't. But I don't know. Maybe that's true, right? Maybe we're not the only people out there that are good at Arena but sucks at Priest because of this. But I have seen other streamers do really well with Priest too, so, like, pretty consistently. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a weird class. But regardless, I think it's funny that that's the lowest win percentage, even though Priest was considered, like, at least an above average class in the prior metas, and in 7.1 it's actually one of the top classes. I think everyone agrees. So I think it's funny that the actual results are saying, like, no, Priest sucks, for good players at least.
Yep.
Okay, so next week, Chalky, it's going to be super interesting. Tune in. It's going to be pre-recorded too. I don't know when we're releasing it. I'm going to probably try to release it also on Sunday, just to keep it, even though it'll be pre-recorded a couple days before that. But tune in then. It's until then, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. See you guys.
See ya.